When an outlaw biker begs for help to save his brother from the riders, too late. If you're watching this, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one, stories about the choices that change everything. Don't miss them. Ray Nichols stopped answering calls from Nebraska 3 years ago. He changed his number twice, moved to a town where no one rode in colors, and worked construction jobs that paid cash at the end of every week. He didn't talk about motorcycles. He didn't talk about the Phantom Kings. When people asked where he was from, he said Ohio, which wasn't true, but it was easier than explaining why he left. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Ray didn't recognize the number. He almost didn't answer. But something in the way it kept ringing, 3 times, then 4, made him reach for it in the dark. "Ray." The voice was Danny's, younger by 6 years, but it sounded older now, worn down. Ray sat up in bed, his chest tight. "How'd you get this number?" "Doesn't matter." Danny's breath was uneven, like he'd been running. "I need you to come get me." Ray pressed his palm against his forehead. "I can't do that." "I'm asking you as your brother. You stopped being my brother when you stayed with them." There was a long pause. Ray could hear wind in the background, the faint hum of traffic. Danny wasn't inside. He was somewhere open, exposed. "I'm leaving the club," Danny said. "Tonight I'm done." Ray's jaw tightened. "You don't leave the Phantom Kings, you know that." "I have to." "Why now?" Danny didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because they're going to kill me if I don't." Ray stood up, pacing the small bedroom. His hands shook. He hadn't heard Danny's voice in 3 years, and now this. "What did you do?" "I can't say it over the phone." "Then you're not telling me enough." "Ray, please." Danny's voice cracked. "I'm at a gas station off I-80 just past Kearney. I've got maybe an hour before they figure out I'm gone. If you don't come, I'm dead." Ray closed his eyes. He thought about the last time he'd seen Danny, standing in the clubhouse parking lot, arms crossed, refusing to look at him. The Phantom Kings had called a vote that night. Ray had been the only one who said no. The only one who believed that what they'd found on that back road wasn't theirs to keep. The only one who thought turning it in was the right thing to do. The vote was unanimous, except for Ray. He was out the next day, no ceremony, no farewell ride. Just a text from the chapter president. "You're done, don't come back." Danny had watched him pack his bike and leave. Didn't say a word. Now Danny was calling. Now Danny needed him. "I'll be there in 4 hours, Ray said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Ray hung up and stared at the phone. He hadn't ridden in 3 years. His Harley was in the garage, covered with a tarp, the battery long dead. He didn't know if it would even start, but he went downstairs, pulled the tarp off, and checked the oil. The tank was half full. The tires still had air. He connected a charger to the battery and waited. The ride to Nebraska felt longer than it should have. Ray took back roads, avoided the interstate where he could. He didn't wear colors. He didn't carry a gun. He was just a man on a bike, moving through the dark. The last time he'd been to Nebraska, the Phantom Kings were still whole. 23 members, a tight charter. They rode together every weekend, ran a few side businesses that kept money flowing, and held themselves to a code that was older than any of them. No one walked alone. Decisions were collective. Silence was protection. Don't touch what isn't yours. That last rule was the one that broke them. It was a Sunday ride, late September. They'd been heading back from a rally in South Dakota, taking the long way through the sandhills. The roads were empty. The air was clean. It should have been a good day. Then Bobby Kern's bike overheated. They pulled off onto a dirt road to let it cool, and that's when Ray saw it, a canvas duffel bag in the tall grass, half hidden by the embankment. He walked over, unzipped it, and stopped breathing. Cash. Banded stacks of hundreds, more than Ray had ever seen in one place. The others gathered around. No one spoke for a long time. "We leave it," Ray said. "Like hell we do," Bobby said. "It's not ours. It's not anyone's, not anymore." Ray looked at the others. Most of them were already nodding. A few avoided his eyes. Danny stood at the back of the group, arms folded, silent. "This isn't what we do," Ray said. "It's exactly what we do," Bobby said. "We take care of each other. This is a gift. We don't walk away from it." The vote happened right there. Hands went up one by one. Ray was the only one who didn't raise his. Bobby zipped the bag closed. Then you don't get a share and you don't say a word. Ray looked at Danny. His brother's hand was up. Ray rode home alone that night. By morning, his patch was gone. The gas station was nearly empty when Ray pulled in. A single clerk stood behind the counter inside, staring at his phone. Ray circled the lot once, scanning for Danny's bike. He didn't see it. He parked near the air pump and waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Ray checked his phone. No messages. He tried calling the number Danny had used. It rang once, then went dead. A sick feeling settled in his stomach. He walked inside and asked the clerk if he'd seen anyone on a motorcycle in the last hour. The clerk shook his head without looking up. Ray went back outside and checked the lot again. Nothing. He called the number 3 more times. Each time it went straight to voicemail. Ray stood in the fluorescent glow of the gas station lights, staring at the empty road. He didn't know if Danny had been here at all. He didn't know if the call had been real or a setup. He didn't know if his brother was already dead. But he knew the Phantom Kings, he knew how they worked, and he knew that if Danny had tried to run, they would have caught him before he ever made it to the interstate. Ray got back on his bike and started riding west. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a destination. He just rode, because stopping felt like giving up, and giving up felt like letting Danny disappear without a trace. The road stretched out ahead of him, dark and silent. He'd been gone 3 years. The club didn't forget, and neither did he. If this story is hitting different, make sure you're subscribed. There's more coming, stories that don't let go. Hit that like button so others can find this too. Ray reached Lincoln by dawn. He pulled into a truck stop off Highway 77 and sat in the parking lot with the engine idling. His hands ached from gripping the bars for 4 straight hours. His phone had no new messages. Danny's number still went straight to voicemail. He bought coffee inside and stood by the window, watching the sun come up over the flatland. A few semis rolled through. A family in a minivan stopped for gas. Nobody looked at him twice. Ray knew 3 places Danny might go if he was running. The first was their mother's house in Grand Island, but she'd been dead for 2 years, and the place was sold. The second was a cabin near the Platte River that the club used to use for weekend runs. The third was nowhere, just open road, no plan, pure panic. Ray didn't think Danny had made it to any of them. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old contacts. Most of the Phantom Kings numbers were gone, deleted years ago. But one name was still there. Marcus Lowe. Marcus had been road captain when Ray left. He wasn't the president, wasn't the enforcer, but he was the one who kept the chapter running, the one people listened to. Ray stared at the number for a long time before he pressed call. It rang 4 times, then Marcus picked up. Ray Nichols. Marcus's voice was flat, unsurprised. Didn't think I'd hear from you again. I'm looking for Danny. Yeah, so are we. Ray's chest tightened. Where is he? If I knew that, we wouldn't be looking. When did he leave? Marcus didn't answer right away. Ray could hear him breathing, thinking. Last night, around midnight, he was supposed to be at the clubhouse, never showed. We checked his place. Bike's gone. Phone's off. What did he do? That's between him and the club. He called me, Marcus, said you were going to kill him. There was a long silence, then Marcus said, he talked to someone he shouldn't have, that's all I'm saying. Ray's grip tightened on the phone. Who? Doesn't matter. What matters is he broke the code, and now he's running. You don't have to do this. It's not up to me. Then who? Bobby Kern's president now. Has been for a year. You know how Bobby is. Ray closed his eyes. Bobby Kern had been the loudest voice that night on the dirt road. The first one to say they should take the money. The one who made it clear that walking away wasn't an option. He's my brother, Ray said. He stopped being your brother when you left. Marcus's voice didn't change, and he stopped being ours when he opened his mouth. What did he say? Enough. Ray pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. If I find him first, then you better keep him gone, because if we find him, it's over. Marcus hung up. Ray stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to his ear. He thought about the last time he'd seen Bobby Kern, standing in the clubhouse with his arms crossed, that same hard look in his eyes. Bobby didn't forgive. Bobby didn't negotiate. Bobby believed in the code above everything else, even when the code was wrong. Ray finished his coffee and walked back to the bike. He didn't know where Danny was. He didn't know if Danny was even still alive. But he knew that if the club was looking, they wouldn't stop until they found him. And they were better at finding people than Ray was. The cabin near the Platte River was an hour north. Ray took county roads, avoiding anything that looked too open. He passed through small towns with empty main streets and churches with gravel parking lots. The land was flat and wide, the kind of place where you could see someone coming from miles away. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by cottonwoods. It had been built by one of the original club members back in the 80s, a place to get away, to drink without the law paying attention, to handle business that couldn't be handled in town. Ray hadn't been there in 4 years. He parked the bike a quarter-mile out and walked the rest of the way. The cabin looked abandoned. The windows were dark, no bikes in the driveway, no fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Ray circled the property once, checking for signs of movement. Nothing. He tried the front door. Locked. He went around to the back and found a window with a broken latch. He pushed it open and climbed inside. The air was stale. Dust covered the furniture. The kitchen sink was dry. No one had been here in weeks, maybe months. Ray walked through the main room, checking for anything that might tell him Danny had been there. He found a few empty beer cans on the counter, a deck of cards on the table, a jacket hanging on a hook by the door. None of it was recent. He was about to leave when he saw the notebook on the kitchen table. It was small, spiral-bound, the kind you'd buy at a gas station. Ray picked it up and flipped through the pages. Most of them were blank, but near the back, there were notes, dates, names, amounts. Ray recognized the handwriting. It was Danny's. The entries went back 6 months. Each one listed a date, a location, and a number. Some of the numbers were small, a few $100s. Others were in the thousands. At the bottom of the last page, Danny had written a single line. "They're using the money to buy in. I can't be part of this anymore." Ray stared at the words. He read them again. Then he tore the page out of the notebook and folded it into his pocket. He didn't know what Danny had gotten into. He didn't know who they were or what buying in meant. But he knew enough to understand that Danny hadn't just broken the code. He'd kept a record of it. And in the Phantom Kings, keeping a record was the same as betrayal. Ray climbed back out the window and walked to his bike. He checked his phone one more time, still no messages. He sat on the bike for a long time, staring at the dirt road ahead. He thought about calling Marcus again. He thought about riding to the clubhouse and demanding answers. He thought about going back to the gas station and waiting, hoping Danny would show. But none of those things would change what had already happened. Danny had kept notes. He'd planned to leave, and now the club knew. Ray started the engine and pulled onto the road. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he was already too late. This is the kind of story that stays with you. If you want more like it, subscribe now. Hit that like button and let's keep going. Ray found the first sign 20 miles outside Ogallala. He'd been riding west on Highway 30, following a hunch that Danny might have headed toward Wyoming, away from the charter's territory, toward open country, where a man on a bike could disappear if he moved fast enough. The sun was high now, the heat coming off the asphalt in waves. Then he saw the bike. It was pulled off on the shoulder, leaning against a fence post, black and chrome, Danny's Softail. Ray would have recognized it anywhere. He slowed and pulled over 50 yards back. His heart was hammering. He killed the engine and sat there scanning the area. The road was empty in both directions. No cars, no movement. Just the bike, sitting there like it had been abandoned. Ray got off and walked toward it slowly. The closer he got, the more wrong it felt. The bike was upright, kickstand down, keys still in the ignition. The tank was half full. The engine was cold. Ray knelt down and checked the tires. No damage. No sign of a blowout or mechanical failure. Danny hadn't broken down. He'd stopped. Or he'd been stopped. Ray stood and looked around. There were no houses nearby, no gas stations, no businesses. Just fields on one side of the road and a line of scrub trees on the other. He walked toward the trees, his boots crunching on gravel. That's when he saw the blood. It wasn't much. Just a few drops on the dirt near the tree line. Then a smear on a low branch. Ray's stomach turned. He followed the trail deeper into the trees. moving slowly, listening. 30 feet in, he found Danny's phone. It was face down in the dirt, the screen cracked. Ray picked it up and tried to turn it on. Nothing. The battery was dead, or it had been smashed. He slipped it into his pocket and kept walking. The trail ended at a clearing. There was more blood here. Not a lot, but enough to know that someone had been hurt. Ray knelt down and touched the dirt. It was still damp. This had happened within the last few hours. He stood and turned in a slow circle, scanning the ground. No shell casings, no weapon, no sign of a struggle beyond the blood. Whoever had done this had been quick and clean. Ray walked back to the road and stood between the two bikes. He pulled out his phone and stared at it. He thought about calling Marcus again. He thought about calling the police. But he knew neither of those calls would help Danny now. The Phantom Kings didn't leave bodies where people could find them. They took care of their own problems, they cleaned up. And when someone broke the code the way Danny had, the cleanup was final. Ray looked west, then east. He didn't know which way they'd gone. He didn't know if Danny was still alive. But he knew that leaving the bike on the side of the road was a message. "We found him, and we want you to know." Ray got back on his bike and sat there with the engine off. His hands were shaking. He thought about the night he'd left the club, the way Bobby Kern had looked at him, the way the others had turned their backs. He thought about Danny standing in the parking lot, silent, his hand raised in that vote, He thought about the money in the duffel bag, and how everything had changed because of it. Ray didn't believe in fate. He didn't believe the road decided things for you. But he believed in consequences. He believed that every choice carried weight, and that some choices were too heavy to carry alone. Danny had made his choice, he'd kept notes, he'd planned to run, and now he was paying for it. Ray started the engine. He didn't follow the road west or east. He turned around and headed back toward Lincoln. There was one more place he needed to go, one more person he needed to see. If Danny was still alive, there was only one man in the Phantom Kings who might tell Ray the truth. And that man was Marcus Lowe. The clubhouse was on the east side of Lincoln, tucked behind a chain-link fence in an industrial area that smelled like diesel and burnt rubber. Ray had been there 100 times before he left. He knew the layout. He knew the cameras. He knew which door was always unlocked. He parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. It was late afternoon now, the sun low and orange. The clubhouse lot was full, 10 bikes, maybe 12. The Phantom Kings were inside. Ray didn't have a plan. He just walked up to the fence and stood there, his hands in his pockets. A prospect came out first, a kid in his 20s wearing a vest with no patches. He saw Ray and stopped. "You lost?" "I need to talk to Marcus." The kid squinted. "Who are you?" "Ray Nichols." The kid's face changed. He turned and went back inside without a word. Ray waited. 5 minutes later, Marcus came out. He was older than Ray remembered, more gray in his beard, more weight in his shoulders. He walked to the fence and stopped a few feet back, his arms crossed. "You got a lot of nerve coming here." "Where's Danny?" "I told you, we don't know. His bike's on Highway 30, there's blood in the trees." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Then I guess you know more than we do." "Don't do this, Marcus." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't know what happened." Marcus stepped closer to the fence, his voice dropped. "You left, Ray. You walked away. You don't get to come back here and ask questions like you're still part of this. He's my brother. He stopped being your brother 3 years ago, and he stopped being one of us last night." Ray's jaw tightened. What did he do? Marcus stared at him for a long time. Then he shook his head. "He talked to a cop, said he had information, said he wanted a deal." Ray felt the ground shift under him. "What kind of information?" "The kind that gets people locked up. The kind that ends chapters." "The money." Marcus didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Ray closed his eyes. He kept notes. "We know." "Where is he?" "I can't tell you that." "Can't or won't?" Marcus looked back at the clubhouse, then at Ray. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Bobby doesn't want loose ends. You know how he is. Danny made his choice. Now we're making ours." "Is he alive?" Marcus didn't answer. Ray gripped the fence. "Marcus, please. Go home, Ray. There's nothing you can do." "I'm not leaving without him." "Then you're not leaving." Marcus turned and walked back toward the clubhouse. Ray stood there watching him go. He thought about climbing the fence, He thought about forcing his way inside. He thought about all the things he could do that would end with him in the ground next to Danny. But he didn't move, because Marcus was right, there was nothing he could do. The Phantom Kings had already decided, and once they decided, there was no changing their minds. Ray walked back to his bike and sat there in the fading light. He pulled the folded page from Danny's notebook out of his pocket and read it again. They're using the money to buy in. I can't be part of this anymore. Danny had tried to do the right thing. He'd tried to walk away, and it had killed him. Ray folded the page and put it back in his pocket. He started the engine and rode out of Lincoln without looking back. He didn't know where Danny was. He didn't know if his brother was still breathing. But he knew that by the time he found out, it wouldn't matter anymore. Don't let this story end here. Subscribe and hit that like button. There are more stories like this waiting, and you won't want to miss them. Ray rode until the highway blurred. He didn't stop for gas, he didn't stop for food, he just rode, the engine noise filling the space where thought should have been. By the time he reached the South Dakota border, it was dark. He pulled into a rest stop and sat on a picnic table under a security light, staring at his phone. No calls, no messages. Danny's cracked phone was still in his jacket pocket, dead and useless. Ray had nowhere left to look, no one left to call. The Phantom Kings had Danny, or they'd already finished with him. Either way, Ray was too late. He'd been too late the moment Danny made that call. Ray thought about going to the police. He could show them the notebook page. He could tell them about the blood on Highway 30, about Danny's abandoned bike. But he knew how that would go. The cops would ask questions Ray couldn't answer. They'd want to know about the money, about what the club was buying into, about names and dates and details Ray didn't have. And even if they believed him, even if they investigated, it wouldn't bring Danny back. The Phantom Kings didn't leave evidence. They didn't leave witnesses. They'd been doing this long enough to know how to disappear a problem. Ray pulled out his own phone and scrolled to Marcus's number one more time. He stared at it. Then he called. Marcus picked up on the first ring. Ray, where is he? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Ray could hear voices in the background, the low rumble of bikes. You should stop asking. I need to know. No, you need to let it go. I can't do that. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then you're going to end up like him. Is he dead? The line went silent. Ray waited, his hand gripping the phone so hard his knuckles went white. Marcus, is he dead? Yeah. Marcus's voice was flat, final. He's dead. Ray closed his eyes. The world tilted. He'd known it was coming. He'd felt it in his chest since he found the bike. But hearing it spoken out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. Where? Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Ray, listen to me. You can't go looking. You can't dig into this. Bobby's already asking questions about you. He knows you were at the clubhouse. He knows you've been calling. If you keep pushing, you're next. I don't care. You should. Ray opened his eyes and stared at the empty parking lot. A semi rolled past on the highway, its taillights disappearing into the dark. Did he suffer? Marcus didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. No, it was quick. Ray didn't know if that was true. He didn't know if Marcus was lying to make it easier. But it didn't matter. Danny was gone. And nothing Ray did now would change that. What about the cop? Ray asked. The one Danny talked to. We handled it. Handled it how? Ray, don't. What did you do? Marcus's voice hardened. What we had to. Danny gave up names, he gave up dates, he was going to burn the whole chapter. We couldn't let that happen. So you killed him. Bobby killed him. I just cleaned up after. Ray felt sick. He stood up from the picnic table and paced the rest stop, the phone still pressed to his ear. You helped. I did what I was told. You could have said no. And then what? I'd be dead too. That's how this works, Ray. You know that. You were there. Ray stopped walking. He thought about the vote on the dirt road. He thought about the way everyone's hand had gone up except his. The way Danny had stood there, silent, and raised his hand with the others. He was scared, Ray said. We all were. Then why didn't you stop it? Because it was already too late. The money was gone by the time Danny started talking. We'd already spent it. Already used it to buy into something bigger. Turning back wasn't an option. What did you buy into? Marcus didn't answer. Marcus, what did you buy? Product, we're running it now, Lincoln to Omaha, it's steady, it's good money. and Danny was going to ruin it. Ray felt the weight of it settle on him. The money from the duffel bag hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. The Phantom Kings had taken that cash and used it to get into something darker, something that tied them to people who didn't forgive mistakes. And Danny had tried to walk away from all of it. "You should have let him go," Ray said. "We couldn't, he knew too much. So you killed him for knowing. We killed him for talking." Ray stood there in the dark, the wind cold against his face. He thought about the last time he'd seen Danny, standing in the parking lot silent, watching him leave. He thought about all the years between then and now, all the chances he'd had to reach out, to call, to try. He'd told himself it was better to stay away, that Danny had made his choice, that brotherhood meant nothing if it was built on something wrong. But now Danny was dead, and Ray was the only one left who remembered that it hadn't always been this way. "Where's his body?" Ray asked. "I can't tell you that." "Marcus!" "I can't, Ray. If I tell you, Bobby will know it came from me, and then I'm done too." Ray closed his eyes. "I'm not going to the cops." "I know. I just want to know where he is." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Ray could hear him breathing, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "There's a quarry off Route 2, about 10 miles east of Broken Bow. Old limestone pit, deep water. We used it once before, back in the 90s. Ray's chest tightened. "He's in the water." "Yeah." "You're sure?" "I was there." Ray didn't say anything. He just stood there, the phone pressed to his ear, the weight of it crushing him. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am. You should have stopped it." "I know." Marcus hung up. Ray stood in the rest stop parking lot for a long time, staring at nothing. Cars passed on the highway. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The world kept moving, and Danny was gone. Ray thought about riding to Broken Bow. He thought about standing at the edge of that quarry and looking down into the water. But he knew he wouldn't see anything, just black water. Just silence. Danny was gone, and the Phantom Kings had made sure he'd stay gone. Ray got back on his bike and started riding south. He didn't have a destination, he just rode. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking. He crossed back into Nebraska as the sun came up. The land was flat and empty, the sky wide and pale. Ray pulled over at a gas station and filled the tank. He bought coffee and sat outside, watching the cars go by. He thought about calling the police. He thought about going back to the clubhouse with a gun. He thought about all the ways he could make the Phantom Kings pay for what they'd done. But he knew it wouldn't change anything. Danny would still be at the bottom of a quarry. The club would still be running product, and Ray would still be the man who left, the man who said no, the man who was supposed to protect his brother and didn't. Ray finished his coffee and threw the cup away. He got back on the bike and rode east toward Iowa, toward a town where no one knew his name. He didn't look back. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories waiting. Stories about the weight of choices and the silence that follows. Ray stopped riding 2 states later. He ended up in a town in southern Illinois he'd never heard of. A place with one main street, a diner that closed at 7, and a motel that rented rooms by the week. He paid cash for a month and parked his bike behind the building where no one could see it from the road. The room was small and clean. A bed, a table, a window that looked out at a field. Ray set his bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. He pulled Danny's cracked phone from his jacket and set it on the nightstand. Then he pulled out the folded page from the notebook and smoothed it flat on the table. "They're using the money to buy in. I can't be part of this anymore." Ray stared at the words until they blurred. Then he folded the page and put it back in his pocket. He didn't call the police. He didn't go back to Nebraska. He didn't ride to the quarry to stand at the edge and stare into the water. He just stayed in the room and let the days pass. At night, he'd lie awake and think about the vote on the dirt road. He'd think about the way Danny's hand had gone up with the others. He'd think about the 3 years of silence between them, and how that silence had been easier than the truth. Danny had wanted out, but he'd waited too long. He'd stayed loyal when loyalty meant complicity, and by the time he tried to leave, the door was already closed. Ray had left first. He'd said no. He'd walked away. And for 3 years he'd told himself that was the right choice. That staying would have made him part of what came next. That leaving was the only way to keep his hands clean. But his hands weren't clean, they'd never been clean. Because he'd known what the Phantom Kings would do with that money. He'd known they wouldn't turn it in. He'd known they'd use it to buy something bigger, something darker. And he'd left anyway, without warning Danny, without trying to pull him out. He'd saved himself, and he'd left his brother behind. 2 weeks after Ray arrived in Illinois, a package came to the motel. No return address, no note. Just a padded envelope with Ray's name written in block letters. Inside was Danny's wallet, his license, his credit cards, a photo of their mother from 10 years ago, creased and faded. Ray held the wallet in his hands and stared at it. He opened it and checked the billfold. Empty. He checked the pockets. Nothing. He set it on the table next to the notebook page and sat down. He didn't know who had sent it. Marcus, maybe, or someone else in the club who'd known Danny, who'd wanted Ray to have something. It didn't matter, the message was clear. This is all that's left. Ray thought about calling Marcus. He thought about asking who'd sent the package, about demanding answers. But he didn't pick up the phone. Because he already knew everything that mattered. Danny was dead. The Phantom Kings had killed him, and Ray had been too late to stop it. The road hadn't forgiven Danny for talking. It hadn't forgiven the Phantom Kings for what they'd done. And it wouldn't forgive Ray for walking away when his brother needed him most. The road didn't forgive, it only remembered. Ray stayed in Illinois for 6 months. He worked construction jobs, moved from town to town, kept his head down. He didn't ride much. The bike sat in storage, covered with a tarp, the same way it had been before Danny called. He thought about going back to Nebraska once. He thought about standing at the quarry or visiting the spot on Highway 30 where Danny's bike had been. But he never did. Because going back wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't bring Danny back. It wouldn't erase the vote or the silence or the 3 years Ray had spent convincing himself that leaving was enough. Some nights Ray would pull out the notebook page and Danny's wallet and set them on the table. He'd sit there and stare at them, waiting for something. Guilt, anger, clarity. But nothing came. Just the same hollow weight he'd carried since Marcus told him Danny was dead. Ray had left the Phantom Kings to keep his hands clean. But leaving hadn't been enough. It had never been enough. Because the code didn't just bind the people who stayed. It bound the people who left too. It bound them to the choices they didn't make, to the brothers they didn't save, to the silence they carried long after the road went quiet. One morning in early spring, Ray packed his bag and left Illinois. He rode west, back through Nebraska, past Lincoln, past the spot on Highway 30 where Danny's bike had been. He didn't stop. He just kept riding until he reached the dirt road where it had all started. The road looked the same, empty, quiet. The grass was tall, the embankment unchanged. Ray pulled over and killed the engine. He walked to the spot where they'd found the duffel bag. There was nothing there now, no trace of what had been. Just dirt and grass and wind. Ray stood there for a long time, his hands in his pockets. He thought about the vote. He thought about Bobby Kern zipping the bag closed. He thought about Danny's hand going up with the others. He thought about the road and how it never forgave anyone. Then he got back on his bike and rode away. Ray never went back to Nebraska after that. He never called Marcus again. He never tried to find out what happened to the Phantom Kings, whether they were still running product, whether Bobby Kern was still president, whether anyone remembered Danny at all. He just kept moving, town to town, job to job, alone. Danny's wallet stayed in his jacket pocket. The notebook page stayed folded in his wallet. And the bike kept running because that's what bikes did. They kept moving, even when the rider didn't know where he was going. The road stretched out ahead, empty and silent. And Ray rode it because there was nothing left to do but ride.